What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. Done with a little bit of vacation. Now I'm coming back to join Chris Fedor and Jimmy Watkins to give you the latest episode and talk about everything that has gone on in our absence. I know you missed us, so let's tap back in. Chris and Jimmy, over the last week, there have been some signings around the league. There have been extensions, but maybe none more important to the Cleveland Cavaliers than bringing back Koby Altman, signing him on an extension, even though he had a couple more years on his deal. And this is the third time that he has had a new contract with the Cleveland Cavaliers. This is kind of connected to the window that the Cleveland Cavaliers have. Chris, I know you have the inside scoop on what went down with this extension. Let us know what went through your brain and the brain of the organization.
I think the biggest thing is that Dan Gilbert trusts these guys. You know, Dan is more involved. There's no doubt about it. He wants to be involved in the bigger decisions when it comes to this organization, and rightfully so. Lots of owners around the NBA, lots of owners in the NFL, they want to be involved in the bigger decisions. But for the most part, Dan Gilbert has trusted Koby Altman for more than a decade to run this organization because he believes in Koby's basketball mind. He believes in the type of people that Koby brings to this organization, and because he believes that Koby has put the pieces in place to make this team a championship contender. And look, the Cavs will say it. They'll be the first ones to say it. They were disappointed by the playoff exit. As Donovan Mitchell said during his TV broadcast, his TV appearance, you know, he let him and the rest of the Cavs let the city down, and they let themselves down. And they're still feeling the loss of the playoff exit. But Koby has built something here that is sustainable. Koby has built something here that has been successful to a certain level. For all of the shortcomings that they've had in the playoffs over the last couple of years, they are looked at as one of the best organizations in the NBA. They're looked at as one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. And that's because of Koby Altman in this front office and the moves that they have made to position themselves that kind of way. And if you look at the moves independent of the results, I mean, drafted Darius Garland, drafted Evan Mobley, and you can sit here and you can say, well, those were no-brainer picks. No. These things are hard decisions, and not every pick that is a top 3 pick or top 5 pick turns into Evan Mobley or turns into Darius Garland. So we can push that to the side. So he evaluated properly Darius Garland and Evan Mobley, right? He traded for Donovan Mitchell. That's a transformative trade. He traded for Jarrett Allen, just stole him from the Brooklyn Nets, found Kenny Atkinson after firing J.B. Bickerstaff, and now you're talking about the coach of the year. So there are just so many moves that Koby and this front office have made over the last 5+ years that have put the Cavs in this particular position. But I think the fact that Koby himself has gotten 3 separate extensions from Dan Gilbert, a guy who has historically not valued the general manager position that kind of way, it just shows how much Dan trusts Koby to run this organization.
I just think it's an organizational hell yeah from 2 different standpoints. One, like Chris mentioned, you just take stock of this is, you know, you're extending your architect, and then you start thinking, hey, what did he do? I'm just going to reach, this is the 2018 NBA draft. This was Koby's first draft. And here are the teams in the lottery around the Cavs. Cavs picked 8th. They got Colin Sexton. But even that pick, like, you'd be like, okay, yeah, what is Colin Sexton as an NBA player? I still don't really know. He did help you get Donovan Mitchell, though. He was part of that package. So that's a win. But, okay, Phoenix won DeAndre Ayton. They did get a finals run, not necessarily directly out of DeAndre Ayton, but okay, well, Phoenix, good job. The Kings, Marvin Bagley, obviously terrible pick. Obviously terrible franchise, still toiling. The Atlanta Hawks got Trae Young. I mean, if you ignore the fact that they traded a generational superstar to take Trae Young, that's still a pretty decent pick. Trae Young's a good basketball player, despite my many nitpicks of his game. But they're still, what are the Hawks? They got one weird conference finals run out of it. We don't really take them seriously beyond that. We're starting to again. It's been frickin' 7 years. The Memphis Grizzlies, Jaren Jackson Jr., I would say the Memphis Grizzlies are probably like maybe a touch behind the Cavs, but like on a similar path. They don't quite have, they're not the same level of contender, but like their rebuild has been similar. Chicago at 7. Shrug. Like there's a lot of these teams that go into the lottery. They end up in the lottery again and again and again and again and again and again.
Yep.
And it's really hard, particularly as a mid to small market team, to dig yourself out of that trap, because you really just have to do what Koby Altman done, which is hit after hit after hit after hit. And if you want to go to, again, we're talking about the draft picks and the trades and all that sort of thing. I'll give you Evan Mobley as like hey, he was the third guy. It was a third pick, and he was by far the guy that you want to take with that pick. Darius Garland like barely played college basketball. He was like a real head scratcher. I mean, probably like people liked him, but we didn't have a ton of sample to go off of. And sometimes the draft can go one of two ways. Sometimes mystery can work in your favor. Like, ooh, what could this person be? We can mold them in our own image. It's all potential that we don't get to see as many of your warts. Or it can be like, what have you proven? And so that was, that's kind of a risky pick, and it paid off in spades. The getting Jared Allen just like kind of as like a tack on to was that the James Harden trade?
It was, yep.
Like, that is incredible. But like, just having your ears up and knowing that that's happening and swooping in like that is uncommonly good general managering. And then the Dan Gilbert thing I wrote about this week, this is growth from him. This is not easy for billionaire successful Mavericks to cede control.
Right.
Because they pay a lot for these franchises. So you know what? I'd want to have a say in anything that I paid $375 million for, which of course looks hilariously low today. But back in the day, still, I will never have $375 million. A lot of money to invest in something. You're going to want to have a say in what goes on with it. And also, if as much as we make fun of these like Matt Ishbia types, Dan Gilbert would like us making fun of the Matt Ishbia types. But as much as we like making fun of them for going on little heat checks and saying, well, I've done this in the business world, so I can do this in the NBA world. Like, can you blame them? You don't get to this place in life without hitting a few home runs. Okay.
Yep.
So there is a learning curve with a lot of this stuff. I don't think that Dan Gilbert's batting 1,000 as an owner. I think in most cases with ownership, you get to pick one of two good attributes. Either they spend money or they stay out of the way. Rarely do you get an owner who does both. Dan Gilbert is starting with this Koby Altman extension to thread the needle there. He's always going to have a voice. I've always thought that my ears always perk up when Kenny Atkinson references his hiring. And a lot of times he references Dan Gilbert first before he references Koby Altman. That always hits my antenna a little bit. But this is a guy who used to just dispose of general managers like they were restaurant Tupperware containers. And now he is doubling, tripling down on a guy who deserves it. Koby deserves this trust. He's made all the right moves. He has, but I mean, the Donovan Mitchell trade, we've talked about it, bucks every trend of conventional wisdom in basketball for a team. It's pushing your chips in early before you have any proof of concept. 0 playoff appearances.
Yep.
You're pushing your chips early. You're betting on a guy you're not sure wants to be with you. You don't, on paper, to the general NBA eye, you don't have anything to sell as a market, quote unquote. With Cleveland, it all worked. It all worked because the Cavs have made hit after hit after hit after hit. And again, what Koby Altman said at the end of season presser was like, we like being in this uncomfortable space where people have expectations of us. And I think that's a good way to frame where they're at right now. Like, I think based on the last 3 years since the Donovan Mitchell era, I think fans are a little bit disappointed, and that's fair because the talent is there to do more. At the same time, though, you zoom out all the way, this team has come a long, long way from the post-LeBron era where they basically had nothing. And Koby has built an incredible roster since then.
And the other thing is, Koby in the front office did not make every right move. There were missteps along the way. The John Beilein thing was a complete and utter disaster. But they
Dan Gilbert?
themselves.
Dan Gilbert, anybody? Dan Gilbert, Michigan guy?
Of course. And they protected themselves by bringing J.B. Bickerstaff as the right-hand man of John Beilein and the eventual successor, right? And then some of these other moves that they made throughout the time that Koby has been president of basketball operations, you can sit there and you can say, well, they shouldn't have drafted Isaac Okoro number 5 overall. They should have taken Tyrese Halliburton in 2018. They should have taken Shai Gilgeous-Alexander instead of Colin Sexton. But it's like, they have been right enough to put the organization in this particular situation. And even the missteps that they have made along the way, they have made up for those, or they protected themselves from those to put themselves in this kind of situation.
And of course, this is a lot about the business side of things. And it comes in with the territory about what Chris was talking about is you have to have the business side of things handled. But the other portion of this is what we're getting into as well. The people and how this organization is ran is more so showing you how people interact with each other behind the scenes, the trust. Obviously, Jimmy referenced it to Donovan Mitchell. On paper, you don't have a whole lot to go off of. But in reality, you're in an organization where a lot of different players respect it, a lot of different executives respect it, right? And that goes hand in hand with the fact that Koby Altman, the president of basketball operations, is now on contract through the 2029-2030 season, along with General Manager Mike Gansey, Assistant GM Brandon Weems, Vice President of Basketball Operations and General Counsel Jason Hillman, and Vice President of Basketball Strategy and Personnel John Nichols, also receiving multi-year contract extensions. Obviously, this is Koby Altman's staff, but we understand that not everybody rises to the cream of the crop with you, right? And to see that you have so many people around you that are also respected by the owner is so paramount in showing not only what the organization is planning for, but what their reputation is.
I mean, it's stability, it's structure, it's continuity, it's culture, all of that stuff that hasn't always been synonymous with the Cleveland Cavaliers, all of that stuff that hasn't always been synonymous with the Cleveland Cavaliers in a non-LeBron James era with Dan Gilbert running the show. Like, that's what this organization has. And that's, if you're a player in the NBA, that's what you want to be a part of. If you're a coach in the NBA, that's what you want to be a part of. Some of the problems that some of these organizations around the league have is that they change things constantly, and there's roster turnover, and there's front office turnover, and there's coaching upheaval. The Cavs, the only way things are going to change in this organization in a drastic way is if Mike Gansey takes a president of basketball operations job, if Brandon Weems gets a general manager job somewhere else, if they decide that the second apron is just too penal for them and they've got to make these changes to the roster to get away from the second apron. Because teams in the NBA, point blank period, in having so many conversations in Vegas over the last week and a half, they are, for a lack of a better term, they are terrified of the second apron. And there are teams around the NBA that want nothing to do with the thing, because it just affects team building in such a significant way. So, if there are going to be changes within this organization, those are the reasons for them, not because the organization is in a really, really bad place and they have to start making these decisions to try and crawl out of it.
I'm thinking about Ethan's point about interpersonal relations. I think it was Kevin Clark from ESPN who said once that with NFL GMs, they view, 60% of their job as managing their owner. Because, again, people who buy things for billions of dollars want a lot of input on those things. And I want to be careful how I frame this, because it's not like Dan Gilbert is an adult, a very successful businessman. It's not like this is like a petulant child who needs to be managed. He's learned a lot about being an owner in his time. I mean, it's been 2 decades now. But I think I also wonder if, again, I think Dan is trusting Koby, but I also wonder if Koby is learning how to massage big picture conversations with Dan the more they work together in a way that allows their vision to mesh more. And again, I think you get trust by making good moves, but I think I think the general manager thing that I said, I think that's true in any sport. Like at the end of the day, you have a boss who has the ability to make decisions on a whim, and you have to keep that in check. That's part of your job. Owners are not basketball owners, basketball chairmen, basketball governors, whatever we're calling them now. They're not experts in their field, no matter how much they love the league or played previously. Like they're just not grinding tape. They're just not doing the homework that these front office people are doing. But they have the same amount, if not more power than them. And so that's a challenge of the job. I think that's, we should acknowledge that is, I think that's something to Koby's credit too, is that he has found a way to speak Dan Gilbert's language in a way that has allowed him to keep steering this ship straight amid again, rocky waters, the Knicks series, rocky waters. We're having conversations about should we break up the core four every single playoff exit, and Koby pretty clearly wants to keep being patient. And this is not an owner who has a ton of history with patience, and they're being patient. That's notable.
One of the things that I found interesting, obviously, when reading Shams Charania's ESPN article as it was released that Koby Altman was re-signing, was the fact that this deal was made and set in place to be finalized before the Cavs playoff run at all, right? And obviously, Jimmy, to your point, we don't know these things until they're released, right? And the other point of this is the fact that it's easier for Koby Altman to say these things about patience, knowing his job is not in jeopardy, right? We've had these conversations where people are calling for the firing of Koby Altman. People are calling for Donovan Mitchell and Evan Mobley to be put into trade conversations because they didn't perform the way that they needed to. All these different things, right? But I think you get to a point, whether in life or in this world of sports, where you realize that when people are talking trash about you the most, it means you're doing something right. Because there are so many other people in these conversations singing your praises, but there's also people that are like, well, I would have done it this way, right? And I think it's interesting because we've talked about the patience of this and the runway that the Cavs have and what long-term window or short-term window they might have. The conversation now becomes, okay, you have all of these core players under contract for a few years. Now you have the front office under contract for a few more years. You now get to focus on the basketball side of things outside of all the noise that might have surrounded you for the last few years, right? Donovan Mitchell in a recent interview said that he found peace, solace, grace in the last season because there were no conversations about where he was going to be. That is something that you cannot take from anybody, and something that is going to hold value for not only the players, but also the front office. And as Chris mentioned, the only reason you would be leaving in this situation is if you're elevating, which in that case, I feel like everybody would celebrate that for them outside of what it would mean for the organization as a whole. Getting to this point of what is the runway? What is the journey for this team? Because we've talked about it on this podcast. Donovan Mitchell is a player option, right? And you have to understand that we're trying to figure out what the runway is for this team and where this is going to continue. But the power then becomes into the players' hands. It's a players' league. You have the option for him to extend him, offer him extension, which you know he's likely to not take because he's going to wait till the 10th year of accrued service to get the max contract, all of these things. And Brian Windhorst said on an ESPN Cleveland segment recently that this is a 4 to 5 year window, obviously referencing the contracts for Koby Altman 2029, 2030, right? But is that true? We've talked about it on this podcast saying it could be a 2-year window. It could be a 1-year window. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think there is a couple different layers to this conversation because I think when it comes to the second apron, the limitations of that from a team building perspective really speed up your clock. And I think they shorten your contention window. In saying that, Evan Mobley protects them. If Evan Mobley becomes the guy that everybody in this organization believes that he can be, if he becomes the guy that Kenny Atkinson was talking about during the broadcast, about being in the MVP conversation in the next 3 to 5 years. We've had that conversation on this podcast. Shoot, man, 15 minutes after the Cavs drafted Evan Mobley, big billboards with his face were plastered in downtown Cleveland. So they've put a level of expectation and a level of pressure on him since he was drafted. In his second year in the NBA, there were people inside this organization saying, we're never going to hang a championship banner until this guy is the one, until he's the best player in this organization. Not Donovan Mitchell, not Darius Garland, not Jared Allen, guys that are already here. It's got to be Evan. So these conversations, these comments from people inside the organization, they're not new. They've been happening for years. But now it feels more real that Evan could potentially get to that point because his game is way better than it was. Look, he was an all-star this year. He was second team All-NBA this year. And there's still more that you can pull out of him on the offensive end. You can make him more comfortable out on the perimeter. You can have him handle in pick-and-roll situations. You can post him up, maybe. You can play him at the elbow extended like Chris Bosh back in the day. So there's different things that you can do with Evan within the structure of this offense. You can give him more touches. You can give him more shot attempts. You can give him a higher usage and all that kind of stuff and believe that his game is more ready for that level of involvement on the offensive end, and giving him that level of involvement on the offensive end isn't going to be too much for him. So you're starting to see a pathway to him becoming that, what they're talking about, and he protects them. And the thing that Koby has always said, and he's always tried to do, and this is kind of correlating with the whole LeBron James conversation that is out there in the ether. Koby has never wanted this franchise to be about one person. He has never wanted to build this thing around one guy. You know, the Cavs did that for a number of years with LeBron. A lot of people in the organization would say it was worth it. Duh. They won a championship. They went to the finals 4 years in a row. But they would also say that there were hellish days. That it was a miserable experience to be in a championship or bust situation and have to make all of these win now moves over and over and over again to satisfy a guy who, in many ways, because of the contract that he had, because of the power that he had, and because of the status that he had, was, for lack of a better term, holding the franchise hostage. But everybody would say it was worth it. And we signed up for that because of all the good that comes with that, because of all the ticket sales, because of all of the money, because of all of the success. But Koby has never wanted it to be that. And even if Donovan leaves, that would be a blow, obviously. Donovan is the most ready player in this organization right now to win a championship. He sped up this process for them. He has been everything that they could have wanted from Utah, and even more than that. So it would be a blow if he were to eventually leave this organization, or the Cavs had to make some kind of financial decision at some point when it comes to Donovan. But the belief inside the organization is, well, our parachute is Evan Mobley. By that time, Evan Mobley is going to be ready to be Evan Mobley in big, bold letters. The one. The face of the franchise. He's going to be more skilled. He's going to be more versatile. He's going to be more mature from a basketball standpoint. and he's just going to be more ready for everything that goes with being the franchise face. So I think it's a little bit of, yeah, the contention window is right now because that's what the financial situation would say. That's what the second apron would say. But because there's Evan Mobley, there is a long runway here for this team to still be successful, for this team to still compete at the highest level, provided Evan becomes the guy that so many people think he can be.
I think there's two windows. The Cavs see two windows here that are bridged together by Evan Mobley's longevity. You happen to notice that Koby Altman's contract extension runs up until Evan Mobley's contract extension? That's not an accident.
Nope.
That's there's the second apron it's unavoidable. Even if the Cavs, I would venture to guess that even if the Cavs win a championship with the core four, eventually down the line, someone's going to have to go.
Oh, without a doubt. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
And it might be soon.
Like, that's just reality. Like, even if it works at the highest level, it's going to have to change. And then they will reorient the franchise around Evan Mobley as he evolved as a basketball player. On that note, I would just like to remind people that I wrote at the beginning of the summer, ironically, hey, maybe we should trade Evan Mobley for Giannis column. But in that story, I did put together a list of players that had made all NBA and one defensive player in the same year, age 25 or younger. It's Evan Mobley, Giannis, Kawhi, Dwight Howard, Ron Artest / Metta World Peace, Michael Jordan, and Sidney Moncrief. Of the other 6 people on this list that are not named Evan Mobley, 5 of them finished top 5 in MVP at some point in their career. 4 of them did it at least 3 times. Okay, so pretty strong evidence that something like that is approaching. I think what Chris said about Kobe's experience in the LeBron days sort of coloring how he sees team building now is fascinating because think about how Kobe took over this team. It's in the middle of the summer. David Griffin is trying to wheel and deal trades for Paul George or Jimmy Butler in his last hours on the job, and his contract just runs out. And Dan Gilbert, I think officially Dan Gilbert and David Griffin agreed to part ways, if I recall correctly. I don't know what really happened there. I think if you're trying to trade for Jimmy,
woefully underpaid.
I think but if Griff trades for Jimmy Butler, I think you're gonna want to stick around and see what that looks like. Just spitballing on that one. And I think that the don't build a franchise around one person, don't orient a franchise around one person is a valid philosophy because, again, that same summer, what happened? Kobe's first official day on the job was the day after they traded Kyrie Irving.
Yeah.
And they traded Kyrie Irving because Kyrie Irving, I believe, correct me, Chris, I believe he threatened knee surgery.
Yes.
He threatened knee surgery. So you're not going to have Kyrie either way. You might as well get something for him. And one of the very large reasons for this is that he feels like LeBron casts an unshakable shadow. There's the infamous question to Kyrie in a scrum about what kind of fatherly figure type that LeBron serves for him. And he looks at a reporter and says, I have a father. Very reasonable response. Is just LeBron is a very unique presence. Now,
yes,
I would argue that they're kind of doing something like that with Evan Mobley now. But this is important. Evan Mobley is a very different person than LeBron James. LeBron's awesome. LeBron's approval rating should be near unanimous, particularly around here. He's a child star that emerged from all of the craziness that comes with that, with no scandal. That almost never happens. He's a pillar for the community. He's building schools, folks. We haven't even talked about basketball yet. He's building schools. LeBron's awesome. That being said, he's a difficult guy to build your team around. He's a pretty demanding superstar. The Lakers are kind of done with him now because they have someone else. They have someone that they can leverage against. They can bet against LeBron's leverage that he is losing as he gets older. And they're like, yeah, okay, man, opt in and pout. We're just going to stare at you. And I think if the Lakers got like a really good trade offer for LeBron right now, obviously it's complicated to trade a $52 million 40-year-old, but I think if they got a good offer and they thought the plate pieces that they got back would help contend on Luka's timeline, they'd freaking do it. Like, I think this is a lot of this LeBron posturing is LeBron wants to keep playing, and the Lakers are like maybe for a couple more years, and the Lakers are like, nah, man, we're not trying to hinder our cap space for future Luka free agency moves. I say that to say, it will be easier to orient your franchise around Evan Mobley. He is lower maintenance. He will not. I don't envision a scenario where Evan Mobley is ever holding your franchise hostage. I know that a lot of that has to do with the stakes of LeBron's career and his status. Status doesn't hold franchises hostage. People do. What LeBron did was effective, holding teams' feet to the fire, trying to maximize your title chances every year while you're in your prime, while you're the best player of your generation in your prime. I don't think anyone's going to argue with that. It's just age. I think it's just aged a little poorly. It gets a little tiresome after a while. And I don't think you're going to have to worry about that with Evan Mobley. He just doesn't strike me as the kind of personality type that will ever do that. And again, as long as they have him, I'm not sure that they'll ever he's such a floor raiser. And
he is
okay, even when the Cavs eventually decide we have to break this team up, like that means trading to possibly, depending on where Donovan's at, trading to one or two, maybe three near prime, near stars, in some case full-blown superstars, just rearranging. And whether the Cavs are set up to win a championship in the next 2 years, that remains to be seen. There's a lot of non-basketball questions that we have to answer about them as it pertains to that. Whether they're set up to be competitive for a very long time, that's not debatable. It's not debatable. They're going to be good for a while.
2 points on that, Jimmy. I think you made some good ones. For the LeBron James topic, when you talk about LeBron James having to understand that there's going to be a shift of power, right? It's interesting that we're still having a similar conversation, and when LeBron James isn't leading the charge, the voice and the structure of it changes, right? For years, LeBron was trying to usher the era of Anthony Davis is the man in Los Angeles, right? Now ESPN comes out with an article that is literally headlined, LeBron James to Luka Doncic inside the most delicate superstar transition in NBA history. And then to your point, Jimmy, about Evan Mobley being probably the least strenuous person or a star for a franchise to have to work with, I would also argue that Donovan Mitchell is in that conversation as well. There are few superstars in the NBA that would willingly take a step back and understand that their role is going to shrink to empower those around them. And Donovan Mitchell not only was a guy that recognized this, even though he wasn't keen on the situation from the very beginning, he was understanding that this was what needed to happen. Now he's trying to usher in the era of Evan Mobley is the guy, right? Kenny Atkinson at Summer League was like, Evan Mobley needs to be in the MVP conversation the next couple of years. Donovan Mitchell, then a few days later, was like, do you agree with that? Yes, 1,000% that he needs to be in these conversations. And again, Donovan Mitchell had this conversation with Taylor Rooks on Bleacher Report talking about how he had to step into his own and learn how to be this kind of leader. And there were growing pains this last season of doing that. We all know when those growing pains came, the playoffs, right? Because Donovan Mitchell still wanted to be the guy, thought he needed to be the guy. But there have now been conversations with Evan Mobley, and Donovan is preaching that Evan Mobley understands that now, that he needs to take this step up, that he needs to tell Donovan or Darius or Kenny that he's not getting the ball enough in any given situation if that happens. Also, the fact that Evan Mobley, and this goes back to what we were talking about, Donovan Mitchell kind of sheltering Evan from the spotlight, right? Maybe Evan Mobley simply was not ready to be critiqued as the best player on a team. Maybe Evan Mobley wasn't in the situation mentally that he was mature enough to handle the outside noise of being a number one star. It sounds like the maturation process for Evan Mobley is taking place this summer. At 24 years old, we're seeing a guy that is the defensive player of the year, second team all NBA. Now, even before hitting his ceiling, taking the realization steps to having a player willingly hand you the reins of a franchise, but still being there to hold your hand if things get rocky. I think that is probably, we talk about the LeBron James, the Luka being the most delicate. I think this is probably the best handoff that has happened in NBA history if it goes according to plan. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about the fact that after the 2026-2027 season, Donovan Mitchell has a player option. Then after the 2027-2028 season, if he decides to opt into that player option, is an unrestricted free agent as of now.
I think we have to ask a question about Evan Mobley that's really, really important. Is he an alpha? Not every great player, not every supremely talented player is an alpha. Kevin Durant's not an alpha. He never will be.
Jason Tatum.
I understand what Donovan's saying. I understand what Kenny Atkinson is saying. I've said some of the same things. Look, Donovan said to me earlier this year in Philadelphia, for the first time on the record, Evan Mobley's why I signed back. Like, that is a large part of the reason. What he did against the Boston Celtics is a big reason why I signed back, because I saw that path forward, because I wanted to be alongside him for that particular ride, because he helps me potentially compete for championships. So Donovan can see the talent. Everybody can see the talent. Everybody can see the skill set. As Jimmy said, he is a floor raiser. He's been a floor raiser since the minute he came into the NBA. Because at worst, you're talking about one of the 5 most impactful players on the defensive end of the floor on a nightly basis. That's at worst. And now you're talking about the offensive package that goes along with that. But Chris Bosh was never an alpha. You know what I'm saying? So, like, you can be a supremely talented player, but not have that kind of mentality. And if you're going to win a championship, you're going to need a bona fide alpha. And we know Donovan is. Donovan has shown himself to be, for all of the things that you can say about never gotten past the second round, never gotten to the conference finals or the NBA finals. The way that he's built, the way that he's wired, the maturity, the mentality, everything about him says alpha. I don't know. I don't know about Evan Mobley. I'm still asking that question. I think there are people around the NBA that are wondering the same thing. And you're probably never going to know how somebody's going to handle that particular role until they're in that particular role, until there is no Donovan Mitchell to share that spotlight with, to share the floor with, to share that responsibility with. But I think based on how Evan carries himself and based on everything that we know about Evan, I think there are legitimate questions about whether he can be the number one guy in an organization to lead them to a championship. Not from a skill set perspective, but from a mental perspective.
No one is saying necessarily that Evan Mobley needs to be 30 a night, bag work. It's like how your alpha manifests and where you, like, I think if you asked a GM, just blank slate, we're building a new team, where do you want your alpha player? From what position do you want that? I don't know that anyone would say 6'3" shooting guard. Nothing against Donovan. And obviously, there's more to, as Kenny Atkinson has reminded us before, more to his measurables than 6'3". He's strong. He's got long arms. I get that. But you know how Donovan Mitchell's alpha manifests? Taking 30 shots in playoff games. You could argue the Cavs needed it. You could also argue that that's not the best thing for offensive rhythm and how you get, like, it's cool to say, we've had this conversation before, it's cool to say this, that Donovan's ready to give the keys to Evan, and Evan will, we're only going to go as far as Evan takes us. Fourth quarter comes around, Donovan's put the ball up. That's what I've seen.
Yeah.
That's what I've seen. That's what I've seen. We have not. I don't think we've actually in the regular season. Maybe sometimes he's been more empowered. We have not seen Donovan give the keys up yet because he isn't off. That's hard to do. That's hard to do when you are inherently wired like that. And I bet you there are some times where Donovan just wants to take. Evan's such a sweet kid, and he's such a he works really hard and he does a lot of things right. But I think Donovan just wants to shake him like a snow globe sometimes and just say, hurry up, get here, wake up. Because back to my earlier hypothetical, I think if I were talking to GM and I said, here, blank slate, where do you want your office to be? Big man. I want my office to intimidate ball handlers. I want my office to control the possession game. I want my office to throw weight around and dunk on people. Franchise pillars. This is, we'll say it again, it's a sport for tall people. The best players of all time are mostly Tim Duncans, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's, Bill Russell's, Hakeem Olajuwon's, Shaq's. That's where we I feel like we get creative ways to have this conversation, but like the Cavs need their tall person to be their most dominant player on a consistent basis. Like if I'm teaching someone basketball yesterday, I feel like they could wrap their head around that. And yet we maneuver. It's like, ooh, there's a lot of, look at all these fun double drags that Kenny Atkinson's running. Look at all this motion they've put in the offense. Evan Mobley, do stuff. Do superstar stuff. That's what it comes down to.
As I mentioned before, and Jimmy, you reiterated it there very nicely. Donovan Mitchell has shown growth in leadership and wanting to empower these players in the regular season when we did not see it in the playoffs. But Donovan Mitchell's challenge to Evan Mobley this coming season, from the interview that I watched with Taylor Brooks, shoot 20 shots a game. Not just in the regular season, in the playoffs. Call for the ball. Be demonstrative. Ask for what you want, right? And I think we see these videos of Evan Mobley working out, and some people compare it to Ben Simmons and how there's different kinds of mental difference when it comes to...
Hold on. Do not. First of all, do not disrespect. I know people think, oh, don't disrespect Evan Mobley like that. No. Do not disrespect the sizzle reel king, Ben Simmons, like that. No one does more things in empty gyms that he's never done in a competitive basketball setting more often than Ben Simmons. How dare you? How dare you come at the sizzle reel king like that?
Sizzle reel king. Tell me when he's the king of anything else. Anyway, Evan Mobley, being a guy working on his game, working on his craft, we love to see it. But I'm going to steal another page out of Donovan Mitchell's book. You can say and do all these things behind the closed doors, behind the scenes. You need to apply them in real world situations where it doesn't mean anything. And that's the challenge for Evan Mobley this coming season. Applying what you've been working on, doing so much mental and physical into the game that is going to translate on the floor for the Cleveland Cavaliers in the 2025-2026 season.
Evan is a great player. He works his butt off. He has evolved his offensive game in a significant way that tells you that he understands the limitations and the weaknesses, and he works to correct those. But going back 3 years now, the Cavs players, every single Cavs player under JB Bickerstaff had a note card in their locker room with what their role was for the team and what JB Bickerstaff was asking for that player to be for the team. And JB's number one message to Evan Mobley was be assertive. Assertiveness. And guess what? The year after that, it was assertiveness. And then Kenny Atkinson comes to Cleveland, and it was assertiveness. Be aggressive. Demand the basketball. Be more involved on the offensive end of the floor. We're going to put the ball in your hands, and we're going to have you operate pick and roll. Grab rebounds and push in transition. Donovan Mitchell's number one message to Evan Mobley since the moment he got here to Cleveland. Be assertive. Be aggressive. So, like, I'm not doubting that he can be that, but that has been the same message for the last 3 years. When he was in college, there were scouts, there were executives that were like, I don't know. Does he have the fire? Does he not? Is he too laid back? Is he too California chill? I go to practices and I want to see a guy that's a little bit more demonstrative. You've got Paul Pierce. You've got Kendrick Perkins. You've got Draymond Green. You've got all these people saying the same thing about Evan. Kevin Garnett saying the same thing about Evan. So when you have to constantly ask a guy to be aggressive and be assertive to like the level that the Cavs are demanding, to the level that his teammates are demanding, I think it's fair to wonder if he's going to get that message or when that message is going to resonate and people aren't going to have to remind him to be that. And it's just inherently in him.
Here's a dumb guy take. You know the difference between Evan Mobley and Giannis, besides like 20 to 30 pounds, is Giannis scowls at people. He makes mean faces. He flexes. He yells. Like, it's dumb. It's dumb. I feel like Russell Westbrook's all-time status is inflated by his scowls. And people, oh, that's the spiritual second coming of Kobe. Yeah, Kobe never won anything. But, like, that kind of matters. Like, Kevin Garnett played with attitude at that position where you're where you're banging bodies all the time. It kind of matters. Like, I hate to fuel. I love Inside the NBA. It's the funniest sports television show of all time. I hate to fuel their kind of hoops discourse sometimes. It's not always, like, spot on. But one thing former players know how to do, or current players know how to do, is spot a dude who has the competitive fire in them. And the fact that you can laugh them off and show them all these Evan Mobley impact metrics, and
Right.
I'll show you my little list of people who made all NBA and won Defensive Player of the Year in the same season before they were 25 years old, and look at all those top 5 MVP finishes they had. Like, it just matters. Sports is like, it's not all math and skill set and projection. Like, it's still basketball is maybe the most human sport, and that's why we talk so much about personality types. And it's plainly obvious that people can change, but it's plainly obvious that on July 16th, 2025, Evan Mobley does not have a I can carry a franchise on my back personality type.
We talk a lot about stats on this podcast, but I think what we do really well as a collective unit is we understand that this is a person's game. Like, this is more than just a sport. This is a job. This is an atmosphere. This is an environment. This is a lifestyle that every single player in the NBA has to go through. Obviously, there's different roles. Obviously, there's different stressors and all these things. But the reality is everybody is feeling something. And Donovan Mitchell may be one of the most emotionally intellectual players in the entire NBA. He knows who he is. He was kind of in the same place as Evan Mobley when he was in Utah. He's gotten to this point. He had to get a mental coach, guys, to be able to help him get to where he is. Maybe he has some recommendations for Evan Mobley. Maybe he can help him by coaching him the same way that Mike Conley, Ricky Rubio, and Rudy Gobert did when he was younger. But internal growth is what he needed to get to where he is. A top 15 player in the NBA. Sure. I don't know if there is a better teacher for what Evan Mobley needs, which is you need to learn more about yourself, than Donovan Mitchell. So again, this is me saying the LeBron and Luka transition, most delicate. I think the Donovan Mitchell, Evan Mobley, if it happens, would be the most seamless transition we've seen in NBA history.
Evan's got to get there.
Yeah.
We're seeing the seams on it right now. I think Chris made this point earlier about how sometimes you don't know if that guy's the guy until you clear out for him. Donovan Mitchell, I appreciate how far he's come mentally, but like, he's kind of always been this guy in the NBA. Like, day one, the Jazz gave him the ball and said, do stuff, and he did it. He did it. His rookie year, I just looked this up, Donovan Mitchell was taking 17 shots a game as a rookie on a playoff team. Evan Mobley just took his career high, 12.8. Again, it's not all about Evan Mobley taking 20 shots, but that can be a symptom of something bigger.
I think it's going to help him at the beginning of the season. If Darius Garland does miss 2-3 weeks, maybe a month, shoot, maybe 6 weeks, don't know. For that time that Darius is going to be out, the Cavs are going to be looking for somebody to step up on the offensive end. They're going to look for somebody to have a higher usage. They're going to look for somebody to take some of those shot attempts. And I think Evan's going to feel like, I'm not taking from somebody else. You know what I mean? Like, Darius has the ball in his hands. Donovan has the ball in the hands. If I get the ball and I take all these shots, then I'm taking them from somebody else. With Darius out of the equation, it's going to happen organically, where Evan's going to be more involved offensively, where he's going to get more shot attempts. And for however long at the beginning of the season that Darius is going to be out, that's going to make Evan more of a natural focal point. And I think that's going to help empower him even more. So I think that's going to be as bad as it is for Darius, and as bad as it is potentially for the Cavs, because they have some things that they'll have to figure out with their lineups, with their combinations, with their roster overall. I think it's really, really good for the development of Evan Mobley.
And again, I do not think it's the development of anybody else around him. I think it's Evan Mobley's mental internal development that needs to take the biggest step this year. When you talk about his handle, his three-point shooting, all of that stuff, that can all improve. But if he doesn't have the mental capacity that Donovan Mitchell had to learn, then this is going to be a much more difficult conversation come trade deadline time, come end of season time, when we get to the playoffs and how this team is going to be constructed. And Chris, I think you made a great point earlier, and I'm just going to reiterate it. Evan Mobley is supposed to be the safety net for everything else, right? So you need him to be stable physically and emotionally and mentally. It's a hard thing to do in the 82-game season and 16 games or 12 games in the playoffs, but the reality is the Cavs need him to do it, and there's no ifs, ands, or about it. So we'll just have to wait and see if he actually shows up this season and what that means for the entire Cavs and the NBA for that matter. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. We know it's been a little bit since we did a Hey Chris episode, so keep an eye out for a text from us tomorrow to get your questions. But the only way to get this and to send in your responses is to sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy, but we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around, because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast. It's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through Subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.